Hi everyone, my name is Leann, and I am really excited to be sharing my card with you today and guest hosting for the Greeting Farm. For those of you who don't know me, I have a channel here on YouTube called Shop Leanne where I create mostly cards and some art projects as well. So let's get started. For this card, I'm using an A2 folded card, it's top folded size, and then I have a piece of purple linen cardstock I bought at Michael's in the loose leaf section. And then I'm going to be using the Tweetie Pie stamp set from the Greeting Farm. This is so cute. I love birds, so it's a perfect match for me. And I have a basic circle template that I'm going to cut a piece of Nina Solar White cardstock with for my stamping background. I have this sheet of Recollections paper called Watercolor Multi-Dots, and it's also in the loose leaf paper section at Michael's. I'm going to cut the top part off. And omit that first because I want to use that top corner for my background. I'm going to use my tape roller and apply tape around the perimeter of my card base. This is the folded card. And then I'm going to attach it to the back of the watercolor paper. So I'll just put this in place generally around the edge, but it doesn't need to be perfect. I will trim it down so I get a nice matching clean edge with the edges of my card. So I'm just using my ruler and my X-Acto knife and my cutting mat, and so that's the easiest way to get the cleanest cut. And then just lining it around the edges of my card, and there has my perfect background. It's nice and trim and fits nicely. So I'm going to work up my purple linen piece next, and here I've cut out my circle with my die cutting machine. And so I'm going to put the circle in place so I know where to stamp. I'm going to use Versamark ink because I do want to do some embossing. And I'm going to use this solid heart here from the stamp set. To prepare my work surface, I'm coming in with some kitchen flour and a mop brush. I'm just going to brush this over the background where I will be embossing so that my embossing powder doesn't stick where I don't want it to stick. So once I have that prepared, I'm going to come in with the stamp, and I will use that Versamark embossing ink, and it's a sticky ink, and that will hold the embossing powder for embossing. And so I'm going to put my circle down just to use as a guide so that I know where my hearts need to be. And I'm going to use this embossing powder from Michael's. It's in the color Eggplant from Recollections, and it's a pearlized embossing powder, so it'll look really nice with this purple linen paper. So I'm starting by putting my hearts in the corners, and then I'm going to put one heart on the middle part of each side. And then I'll come in and put them on the bottom as well. And this is just to get the spacing laid out. So once I have those three in place at the top, the middle, and the bottom, then I'm going to come in and put hearts in between those hearts in the opposite direction. And so I find with the hearts sort of going to the left and then going to the right, it kind of reminds me of little bird tracks when birds hop along and their little feet point out. So it sort of put me in mind of that. So I'm going to come down with my embossing powder now and sprinkle that over where I stamped my hearts. And once I shake the embossing powder off, you should be able to sort of see where that is. Well, that's easy to see there. And I'm going to tap that off with my brush. Now I've run this under my heat tool off camera, and you can see that they're all shiny and really pretty. The pearl does leave a little bit of residue, so I'm using a damp paper towel just to wipe that off. Just very slightly damp, and it comes off very easily and cleans up around the hearts. So you can see there that it comes off with ease, and it doesn't have to be too wet, so you don't want to put too much water on your paper towel. Now I'm going to attach this to my card base that I'm working up. I'm going to use my tape roller and just run around the perimeter and then an X down the middle. And so I'm just eyeballing center, seeing where the edges are and making sure I have the exact room on each edge. And I think that all looks good so far. And so I'm ready to do my stamping next. I'm going to bring in my stamps and lay out my scene, my composition, just to make sure that all of my elements fit nice and snug in that circle before I stamp anything. I don't want to run out of room or have too much room on one side. So I'm just working with the position, and I'm going to put a little heart above the birds, the little lovebirds. And so I have paper underneath, and I'm just going to draw with my pencil where the edges of my branch are. And I'm going to use that as my grounding element first. I will stamp that, and then everything will be stamped around it. And so I'll build my scene that way. So by drawing on the paper behind my circle, I can know where to stamp that stamp right into the perfect position. So I'm using Memento Tuxedo Black ink because I am going to be using Copic markers to color, and this ink works really nice with Copic markers. And so just lining up my tree branch and stamping it in place, and it becomes my first element in my scene. And so I'm going to come in with the birds next. They're probably the next largest element, so it's easy to work, or easiest to work from the largest stamp in your scene and then down to the smallest stamps. I stamped those together so they both sat on the tree branch equally. And then I'm going to do the sentiment next. And that tucks in really nice under this branch. And to finish it off, bringing in the sweet little heart above the birds. I'm going to use these two distress inks in Spun Sugar and Antique Linen just to add a little bit of background color to the sky around the birds. So I'm using the Antique Linen first, the yellow color, and just very gently bringing that in around the edge, not too far in. I don't want to smudge the Memento ink. It will create a little bit of a mess, so you don't want to hit those inks together. And then Spun Sugar more at the top to bring in some of the pink, and this also brings in the colors from the watercolor background that is on the card base too. So now I have that ready. I'm going to do my Copic coloring. For my little birdie chest, I have the little boy bird on the left, and so I'm going to use the lightest color there, B60, just blocking in some of the shadows, and then I will blend it out with my colorless blender. Now my B23 is my shadow color, but it's quite dark, and so I'm just touching the tip of my B60 to my B23 as you see there. And so that creates sort of an in-between color. And so my shadow color won't be too harsh, but I can still get a darker blend. This is a nice trick to use if you don't have a lot of Copic colors. You can stretch your markers this way. And so with the same coloring techniques, I'm going to color my little girl birdie in the pink colors and purples. So I'm doing a wash of the RV10 to start, and then coming in with V15 and doing a touch to the tip to create the shadows as well, because that V15 is a pretty dark color and I don't want to make my shadows too dark. Overall, I want my card to be light and whimsical, and it's a love card, so keeping it light, keeping the colors light. So I'm just beefing up those shadows just underneath the hair a little bit and around the lower edges. And then once I have those in place, I do come in with my lighter color and wash over those just to blend them into the background a little bit more to soften the edges of the shadows. I find that helps a lot. And so I decided to come in and just add some shadow to the hair a little bit more, and just at the very base of the birds to create that dimension. I found it was a little light, so I just came in with a slight bit of shadow. Now for their beaks, I'm just going to use some yellows and skin tones, some warm colors just to create those. When I am choosing colors to color my stamps with, I try to think about the background colors in my card and creating a palette that matches with that, not going too far outside of the spectrum. So my base is very warm and has a lot of yellows and pinks and warm tones, so that's sort of the thought process behind choosing these colors. So I'm going to color the leaves next, and these are super simple, just doing a wash of the YG11, which is a light green, and then coming in with YG13 at the top. So I'm creating a shadow from the top of the leaf as if it's bending out from the branch. And then once I have these colored in, I'm going to come in with a slightly darker green and just enhance the vein of the leaf and create a shadow along that vein line in the center so it looks like it's folding in a little bit. just to give a little bit more dimension. For my heart, I'm going to use the same colors I used to color my little birdies. And so I'm using RV10 as the base, and then V12 is coming in at the top as a shadow color, which is the color I used on my girl bird. And then I will come in with my shadow color from my boy bird and color that at the very top. And so this is all ready to assemble. I'm going to use foam tape just to give a little bit of interest and dimension to my card. And because all of my focal point is on that circle, just the foam tape helps elevate it a little bit more. And so I'm just cutting pieces around the perimeter, and then I'll put a piece in the middle so that it doesn't sag or push down if it's any pressure put in that center part. Now to get this in position, I'm going to use my X-Acto knife. I find this is super helpful for lining it up and finding center so my hands aren't in the way and I can clearly see where the even space would be to put this down on the card. Once I have position, then I just push it into place. And so to add a little bit more to my card to finish it off, I'm going to put some sequins. And I'm just sprinkling some on the background and seeing where they fall. The typical design trick is to use odd numbers. There's something about even numbers that creates competing contrast. So if you use odd numbers, it helps disperse visual direction in the card. We learned this in design school, and so it's always worked, and it's something I always apply to everything I do. So I'm going to come in with some craft glue, and just touching the tip of my knife in the craft glue, I'm going to put a little bit on the back of each sequin and then push it down into place on the card. So I've used a mix of pinks and purples, and I find that these sequins just kind of help pull out some of the colors from the watercolor background. And then by having the sequins in the stamped area and the purple linen, it helps break the frame and marry those two levels of visual art together. Coming in with my Wink of Stella brush pen and clear glitter, I'm just adding a little bit of accent on the bird's belly and on the heart above them. And then this is my gold sparkle jelly roll pen, and I'm just adding some dots into the sky. It has warm tones, and I thought the gold would look really nice with those warm tones. And it just adds a little more visual texture too. So here is the finished card. I had a lot of fun creating this, and there's a lot of interesting visual elements. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you're notified as more videos are posted to the Greeting Farm. If you'd like to see more of my cards, you can find me at shopleanne.com. Thank you so much for watching.